Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
A member of GBF speaking, who has been doing a lot of work in things that a lot of us be really interested in. It's David Richo, who lives in Santa Barbara. He's a psychotherapist, teacher, and writer, and he's written 3 books. I'll give you the titles of them and give you an idea of the kind of work he does. How to Be an Adult, When Love Meets Fear, and Unexpected Miracles, The Gift of Synchronicity and How to Open It. He's working on a new book entitled, and I love this title, More Than We Seem, Inner Demons, Inner Divinities. And I'll let David take over.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm a little nervous about what I should say, but I thought what I'd do is say a few things and then open it up for questions, and then, because I want to hear what you guys' concerns are and try to respond to what's important to you. I would like to begin with a comment on this beautiful Buddha, just in case there's anyone in the group who isn't aware of what this is about. The Buddha's enemies questioned, how do you know that your way of looking at things is true? Can you give us a proof? Is there someone that you can use as an authority? Or can you show us logically? How do you know that what you believe is correct? He sat silently. He placed his left hand on his lap, and with his right hand he touched the earth and said, "This is my witness." Could there be anything more real than that? So, this position that his hands are in is called a mudra, and the left hand is always kept this way in a kind of cupped position of offering and of receiving. And this mudra is the earth-touching Buddha. And then the other one that I would like to share, because it's been so helpful to me and it might be helpful to you in times of fear. On one occasion, his enemies decided to destroy him utterly. And while he was sitting and meditating, they lined up a fierce elephant that was to angrily charge and trample the Buddha. Well, the Buddha looked straight ahead and saw the elephant coming toward him, and realized, as he looked into the elephant's eyes, that the elephant was feeling fear. So he raised his right hand, no to fear. He placed his left hand in the usual position, cupped this way, yes to love. No to fear, yes to love. And the cupped position is, I'm giving you this love of mine. When the elephant saw this, he understood instantly. He stopped in his tracks and bowed and became the Buddha's friend. Well, just that positioning of your hands I find really helpful in times of fear for myself. So I think it's a beautiful mudra to use, and I try to teach it wherever I go. And you can kind of just get into the habit of doing this. Well, let's see. For the first 26 years of my life, I was this intensely passionate devotee of Roman Catholicism. And I was ordained a priest when I was 26. And I worked in Connecticut. And I worked mainly in the anti-war movement, starting a draft counseling center, working with helping people move to Canada, draft card resistance. I worked mainly with the Quakers, and in the course of my 3 years of doing that, I realized that the priesthood wasn't for me, and so I left when I was 29. And by the time I left, I no longer had a devotion to Catholicism. And I discovered Tibetan Buddhism shortly thereafter. And I've been a student of Buddhism for about 28 years. And I've been a therapist for about 30 years. I made a vow to the Buddha to study the Dharma for the rest of my life. So I'm always reading some spiritually oriented book. And recently, in the past 4 or 5 years, something has happened to me that has helped me integrate the strands of my life. And so now I'm working on the subject of how to go back to your religious past and find the riches of it and invest them in an adult spirituality. Believing that if anything intensely held me for that long, it must have a meaning that I can still gain some benefit from. So I'm not bitterly against any of my experience or past connections or the church. I'm looking for ways to pull it together and see it make some sense. And of course, that's also what's happening with me in psychology, because when I work with clients, I've noticed that it would really be helpful for them to practice mindfulness. So I include that as part of the work that I do. I include it in all my classes and in all my books. And I'm a great believer in how mindfulness works. I'd like to do a short example of it toward the end of my talk. It's interesting that Buddhism began with a realization of the inadequacy of one's tradition. Because when the Buddha saw suffering, old age, and death, he realized at the same time that his religious upbringing as a Hindu did not have all the answers for those questions. That something more would be required, another kind of program that would be all-embracing. That program he found when he was sitting under the tree. And it's mindfulness, it's the Eightfold Path, and so forth. So what he noticed were the givens of existence, the conditions that we all live under on this planet. One condition is that things change and end. Even though I would like something to last forever and always be perfect, even though Keats says a thing of beauty is a joy forever and will never pass into nothingness, things of beauty do lose that original exciting appeal after a while and become kind of ordinary. Another condition is that things are not always fair. You don't always get a fair deal in life. Another condition is that suffering seems to be built into growth, change, transition. All the important things seem to have some kind of suffering attached to them. Another condition is that things are unpredictable, that I seem to be in control, but I'm not really in control, that there are other forces at work that change the course of my life, and there's not much I can do about it often. So the Buddha noticed these conditions and came up with a program that he thought would be helpful. They're skillful means to face and live with the conditions of existence. And of course, some of the givens are within ourselves. For instance, one given for you might be that you are an introvert. You're someone who is depleted if you're with people too much. Another person is an extrovert. He's animated by being with people. He loves to be with people. He's not depleted at all. So if you're in a relationship and you're an introvert, the other guy's an extrovert, when he comes home at night, when the extrovert comes home at night, he wants to talk and do some exciting things. When you come home at night, you want to go into your room and relax and read and work on the computer or whatever and kind of be by yourself. So there are givens right in our personality. Some of us are more phlegmatic, some of us are more lively. There are givens, obvious givens of sexual orientation. And accepting these and working with these is the same as fulfilling your destiny in life. Because destiny could be to live out the full potential of the givens and gifts that you came in with. And I think the program of meditation and program of psychotherapy and self-help programs such as AA, this experience here, all contribute to learning how to work with your particular givens. So therapy fits with the Eightfold Path of right speech, right thought, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And basically what psychotherapy is about is the past, present, and the future. At some point in life, you look at your past and realize that it has been formative of many of the attitudes and ways of behaving that you have, especially in adult intimate relationships. That's where it really comes to roost. So if you come from a background in which you were emotionally abandoned over and over again, and I was talking to Howard just before this meeting, both of us were brought up in households where, I hope you don't mind my saying this, both of us were brought up in households where we were called sissies. And you're a fairy, you're a sissy. And I was continually beaten by my mother for being like that. And I changed my effeminate style. I just stopped being so effeminate and tried to act a little more like John Wayne. I didn't quite succeed. But I've thought back to myself, well, maybe, I started out as an effeminate person. Maybe that's what I'm still supposed to be. I don't think I could recover it at this point. But I guess that's who I am deep down, and they kind of beat it out of me. And so there's something about relating to mother and relating to women that has a sense in it for me of you can't be what you really want to be, you can't do what you really want to do. the price is do it her way. So it would be natural for me to carry that over into an adult relationship and to be afraid of too much closeness, because closeness might mean they're going to try to change me in ways that are too radical. So that would be an example of a kind of a past issue and how it comes into the present. Present conflicts, obviously, you work with in therapy, and you also talk about the future steps that are coming up for you. Most of the people who come and see me are coming because of a relationship problem, such as someone has just left, the person's partner has just left with somebody else or is being unfaithful. Some people come in to talk about a step that they're about to take and want to work on how to understand it and process it. My understanding of psychotherapy is not that it's about my telling you what to do or directing you in some way, but to be with you in your conflicted state and to mirror the feelings that you're having and to acknowledge them as appropriate and legitimate in a holding environment, so that together we find out your truth. And so I see therapy as the discovery of one's personal truth and the choice to act on it. Because, of course, we might be afraid to act on our truth. If you find out that your truth is that you're gay and you're in a closeted community, it might be hard to put that into practice, let's say. So that's what the work is about. Now, sometimes in therapy people are working on the subject of betrayal. And here's an example of how psychology and the Buddhist path are integrated. If you accept going in to a relationship that one of the things that could happen is the other person could not keep his or her agreements about fidelity, and that you will be abandoned, you will be betrayed, it could happen. Another given would be that romance is a phase in the first part of a relationship, and that it yields and changes into some conflicts with each other, and that the real commitment happens as you work through these conflicts. So, from the perspective of psychology, if you were to use Jung's perspective, which is the one that I follow, he says, in the face of the givens of existence, what works best is an unconditional yes without protest. So what you're saying is yes to what may happen, and you're even believing that these, and this is such an important point, that these givens that I've been mentioning are not terrible mistakes that were built into the human experience. They're actually the very requisites by which we become people of depth and compassion. Without that list of conditions, without betrayal, without the possibility of abandonment, without the possibility of abuse in childhood, without the possibility of things changing and ending, we would be Pollyannas. We would be superficial. We would not have the depth. Our life would not have the meaning that it does. These conditions are what make us the wonderful creatures that we are. This is what led to Shakespeare and Mozart. It wouldn't have happened if everything was fun and games. So, the Buddha noticed that if you live from a place that's centered, what does centered mean? To be so unmoved by fear or desire that you remain present to your experience. You're no longer swayed by how scary something is or how much you want something. You're sitting like Sitting Bull. He hears the brave saying, "Let's go to war." He hears the old-timer saying, "Let's think about it." He hears the representatives from Washington saying, "We're here to make you a promise." But he sits firmly on the ground. He's not moved by these voices, but he does listen to them. And the decision that comes from that centered place, not pushed by the desires of the braves, not fooled by the promises from Washington, not influenced by the old-timers. He's just present to himself. He's receiving the inputs, but his decision comes from his own centeredness. That's mindfulness. It's the ability to sit with yourself as I sit with you in therapy, and to appreciate who you are and what's going on for you, and to shear off those layers of fear, desire, expectation, the need to be in control, the sense of shame, blaming others, the attachment to an outcome, the need to fix things. When you take all those layers away, then there is nothing left but you in this space, grounded here with your predicament. And your predicament becomes the path. Instead of, well, here's the predicament, so I better change it, I better work with it, I'm so afraid of it. Instead, you finally become present to it. That's the unconditional yes to the condition that's facing you. So, the result of all this is more than a yes. That's the wonderful thing. And maybe the best way to put this is to remind ourselves that when the Buddha was sitting under the Bo fig tree and finally received the enlightenment, lightening yourself up from all those layers of fear, desire, and so forth, just being present in that courageous, compassionate way. Before he went out to preach and talk about his enlightenment, because he was also now the Bodhisattva, he also realized that, well, I'm enlightened, but I'm just not going to just hold the enlightenment for myself. I'm going to share it with everyone. That's my destiny. It's to take my gifts and to share them. But look what he did. Before going on his mission, he stayed right there under the tree for 6 weeks. This was a meditative preparation for his public life. But here's the beautiful part. The second week, he got up, turned himself around, and faced the tree, and spent 1 full week thanking the tree. Isn't that beautiful? He thanked the tree. And I believe that sense of gratitude for whatever the source or nearest presence of anything wonderful that happens to us, that we take the time to say thank you. This fits with this wonderful statement of Dag Hammarskjöld. He was I guess you know who he is. I'm usually talking to a younger audience, so I have to say lots of things I don't have to say here. Here's his statement. For all that has been, thanks. For all that will be, yes. There's the combination. It's the yes and the thanks. And Shakespeare himself in Hamlet, his greatest play, the essence of the Renaissance experience in England. When Hamlet is talking to his best friend Horatio, he says something so beautiful. He says, "Thou hast been one whom fortune's buffets or rewards hath taken with equal thanks." If you're hit, buffet, or if you are stroked, reward, you take both the same way. How do you take them? With thanks. I mean, he was a Buddhist for sure in that moment when he wrote that line. Because there it is, that you're sitting there in that centered position, equanimity, which in Latin means equal spirit. And with equal spirit, you see the buffets and terrible things that might happen to you in the course of life, and you see the wonderful things that happen, and you realize, well, this is what it takes for me to open up my full potential and become a person of love, wisdom, and healing. So really I can be thankful for both of these. Maybe when Judas left the Last Supper and St. John says, "It was night," showing that darkness was now coming into the picture. When Judas left the Last Supper, maybe Jesus looked over and said under his breath, "Thank you for what you're about to do, because you're going to help me fulfill my destiny." So, maybe we could just give one example of the mindfulness, but before I do that, let me just kind of open it to questions, because I just gave some general ideas, and maybe you guys have some specifics. Richard?
So what you're talking about, does that have to do with the whole non-dual nature of being a Buddhist? In other words, both, as you say, reward and non-reward are basically one and the same, because we should take it the same way.
Yeah, we're continually cutting through the divisions of this is bad, that's good, and saying, well, both are useful. So even if I've had a terrible, abusive childhood, there's something about it to appreciate, because that made me the person of strength that I am, let's say. But yes, it's about letting go of the dualism. David?
To look at one of the statements you made. What works best is unconditional yes without a protest. In a sense that I, myself, in my own life, don't find myself there, but where I do find myself is saying yes and then being very aware of the protest and allowing the protest to be as fully present as the yes. And then the other pieces around that are that often the protest, all the time, the protest, although I may not see it, is about me. It really isn't about, my partner or my family or all the places that look like the protest is about. It's about me. And so that therefore my work becomes allowing the protest to be fully present and to let myself be as one with the protest, so that I can incorporate it into the wholeness of maybe the next moment or whatever else is going to happen.
So it's saying yes to the protest, but not having to act on it.
Right.
Good.
It's sort of allowing.
Thank you for bringing that in.
But that's just my experience. I mean, I'm sure.
No, I like that very much. I'll include that from now on. Good, because protest comes from the Latin words meaning for witness. And so a protest comes up in you as a witness to some other orientation or important value in your life that needs to be attended to. Richard.
Can I just ask one more thing about
Yeah.
you're talking about relationships, and one of the experiences that I have again and again with friends and myself is this whole notion of when you meet somebody, it goes something like, "Gee, he's great" or "She's great," but if only. So I see a lot of us sort of struggling with that whole notion of trying to make over somebody, so that if once those things are taken care of, it'll be perfect. And a friend of mine is going through that, has been struggling with that for 5 years. And I was trying to figure out, well, as a Buddhist, how do you, if you really love somebody, yet there are things about them that somehow work, you're in conflict with, how does that get resolved? I mean, I don't know if that's the way to put it, but as a Buddhist, how does one deal with that? Because I think it's a recurring thing. I mean, it's sort of a running theme in relationships. I don't know, maybe. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Bringing the subject up directly to the person as a concern of yours, and here's where the mindfulness comes in. You bring it up without any level or layer of blame. You simply bring it up as a concern of yours, and let's work together on how we can look at this so that we can be together in an effective way. See, the thrust of psychotherapy is to address what comes up, process it by expressing and acknowledging the feelings associated with it, its association with your past, and then as a result of the addressing and the processing, you resolve the issue. Now, if you work with somebody in a relationship and it turns out to be just a given for that person's not going to change something about himself, then the ball's back in your court. Okay, how do I live with this? Because it can't be changed. So I'm changing what I can change, and I'm living with what I can't change. Or saying that this is too much to bear, and so I need to move on. But at no time is there blame or fault in it. See, the central issue in Buddhism is the one that is so hard for that arrogant ego, especially the male ego. It's retaliation. It's get back at people for what they've done to you. That has to go. It started to go for me when I first found nonviolence and I followed Gandhi's approach. And yet it never quite worked. I was still very retaliatory and vengeful in relationships. It wasn't until Buddhism that I finally got to the point where I could let go of it. So my own relationship, most recently, I was with a guy who just up and told me that he had found somebody else on the internet and that he was leaving. And you won't believe this, after that, for at least a couple of months, every time I saw, www. I had to slow. Anyway, when it happened, I felt sad, and I, cried, and I was, promising him anything if he'd only come back, and so forth. But the wonderful thing that I noticed was that at no time during the whole breakup did I ever wish him ill, or did I ever want to get back at him. I still don't. I have a loving intent that he be happy. And when that happened, which was 2 years ago, it was the first time in my life I realized that Buddhism really works. That it really does change an inveterate, long-standing, deep-rooted habit in the human ego to punish, to hurt back, to get back at people. And that can really go when you stay with your practice. It's just the most wonderful gift. And I was just so happy that I felt that way. I mean, I felt better, not wanting to harm him or wishing that he'd come to harm, hoping that the new relationship wouldn't work. I didn't do any of that.
You could actually apply that to your quote-unquote enemies in general.
Yeah. Yeah, that you're just kind of, you're always present as a fair and alert witness, not as the judge and jury. You see, the Buddha realized essentially that there is a sane and awake quality in every one of us. And that this sane and awake quality comes to fruition in those moments when we simply sit mindfully with our breath and let go of all the habits of ego. And there's no difference between that realization and the realization in psychology that we all have wholeness in us, and it's just a matter of opening it up and expressing it. In fact, Jung's wife says it in a very beautiful way. In her book on the Holy Grail, she says, there is an inner wholeness in every one of us that keeps pressing its unfulfilled claims upon us. Isn't that beautiful? That there's inner wholeness inside. Something in us wants us to be all that we can be. Something in us wants us to be saints, which in Latin means whole. And it keeps presenting its bill. It keeps saying, hey, if you want to be whole in the realm of relationship, try this lover and all he's going to put you through. If you want to, be whole in the realm of sex, try this temptation. Try this, it's all, everything that happens is like grist for the mill for that something that wants to fulfill itself. Because a raccoon can be a raccoon just by living according to his instincts. But that's not the case with us. We have work to do. We can't just live according to instinct, because we have a mind, we have an ego, we have free will, and all of those things could get in the way of our becoming who we're really meant to be. We could miss the boat. A raccoon can't. A beaver can't. They have to do it the right way to fulfill themselves. So we need this psychology, spirituality, Buddhist practice. We need all these things to help us stay on track with opening up to who we really are. Well, our time is almost up, so let me just say something about the mindfulness, and I'd like to close with a poem. Here's a little practice that I suggest. And I suggest this to the clients also. Let's say you're facing a problem. Okay. Take some time out in the midst of whatever the issue is to sit in your meditative pose and to imagine your particular problem as a ball that you're holding in your hands, and sit with your hands cupped like this, and you're holding this ball. And tune in to whatever your issue is. For instance, I'm having a conflict with my lover, and this conflict is on my mind. I'm eating, sleeping, and drinking it. I'm obsessed with it. He's getting me so goddamn mad, etc., etc. So I'm holding this like a ball right here. And one by one, you peel away the layers of ego. So the first layer is fear. Okay? Let me just hold this problem but without the fear. And let's see what it is. And you're staying with the breathing. And then you come back and you remove the level of desire to change it. Okay, let's see what it feels like without the fear and without the desire to change it. Then let go of that level of blame of him. The level of shame that you're even thinking about such a thing as this. The level of attachment to a certain outcome. The level of having to fix it. And as you let go of one layer at a time, notice how much lighter this issue is, how much simpler it is, and really it's only pure space. It's only something in the mind. Because most of what we think a problem is not the problem itself, but all the layers that we've added through the habit of that ego that wants to protect itself, that needs to be right, that has to have its way, that feels entitled, that wants to be in control, that's so full of fear, that has to have it come out the way we demand that it come out. When all of that is taken away, very little is left except, oh, I guess what I can do here is speak my truth, hear his truth, work something out. If we can't work something out, maybe we can go to a therapist and have him help us work it out and move on. So everything changes when you work with things on that level. I wanted to actually walk you through it, but we don't have time. But maybe some other time we could do it. Anyway, I'd like to... was there any last question?
It's time.
Time is up. Okay, I would like to just end with a poem by a poet from my home state of Connecticut. He's one of the great modern poets, Wallace Stevens. And I just have a strong suspicion that he's a true Zen master, as you will notice when you hear this poem. And I think it's a good summary for what we've talked about. It feels good as it is, without the giant, the thinker of the first idea. Perhaps the truth depends upon a walk around the lake, a composing as the body tires, a stop to see hepatica, a stop to watch a definition growing certain and a wait within that certainty, a rest in the swags of pine trees bordering the lake. Perhaps there are moments of inherent excellence, as when a cock crows on the left and all is well. Incalculable balances at which a kind of Swiss perfection comes. Not balances that we achieve, but balances that happen as a man and a woman meet and love forthwith. Perhaps there are moments of awakening, extreme, fortuitous, personal, in which we more than awaken, sit on the edge of sleep as on an elevation, and behold the academies like structures in a mist. Thank you. Thank you. I have some handouts of quotations that have been helpful to me, and I'll pass them around. They're all different, and they're just for meditation purposes.
Are there any announcements?
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.